Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 6 of our weekly Q&A videos. We did miss last week. It was because I had an exam either that night. It was the day after. I had an exam.
Yeah, you had to study.
Early afternoon, the day after.
I mean, if you have an exam the day, it's not as big a deal because then that's almost a relief, right?
That's true, yeah. It would be after. So I did have an exam that I had to do, so we had to miss last week, but we're back on track now. I still have exams coming up, but they're not.
So it was a bit of a mess.
Breathing down the back of my neck.
So I want to talk about what happened last week, besides the exams, because that's sort of, I mean, we've dealt with that before. It's not a big deal. You did okay on your exams, too.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Our hard drive crashed. So it's on we've got two computers. We've got our sort of main desktop that's really old, that has all our footage. And normally what I'd like to do on a week when you've got exams is to maybe pull some of the footage that I've been saving up of gameplay. Yeah. And maybe do a multiplayer video on that. And the reason I couldn't, was because I lost all that footage. So I want to talk a little bit about how people back up that data. And when I say people, I mean us. Yeah. Because I think there's definitely things that we could probably do better, but I don't know that it's necessarily workable. So what I had 2 4 terabyte, I have the boot drive. I have 2 4 terabyte hard drives in it. And I've partitioned both of those drives and mirrored 2 terabytes to each other. Mm-hmm. And then there's 2 terabytes that are free. And of course, the drive that failed, the mirrored stuff is fine. But the mirrored stuff isn't this channel. I mean, it's kind of funny and not that, our really high priority stuff that we really want to save are family photos. Yeah. But the hard drive that crashed, when I took it apart and I tried to recover the data, the only stuff that was salvageable was the data that was mirrored that we still had on the other drive, and the stuff that was all our channel footage was gone.
Yeah, so we don't do a backup for our channel footage, because the thing is, by the time it actually makes it into a video, we can download it again from YouTube. Right. So it's not nearly as important. The only thing that we don't get a record of is raw footage, and with the amount of raw footage that we go through that really has nothing worth watching, we don't really bother keeping it.
But it was all the raw footage from the Phantom Zone stuff. It was demonstrations of which ones were fast and doing it really fast in one fight. All the thumbnail stuff, like all those. I remember when we used to do the thumbnails for multiplayer, and they were more of like from the character models. Yeah. Instead of just from their card.
Yeah. They were more effortful.
Yeah, and but when we switched, we had we got a stockpile of. We had stock footage of all the cards to easily combine them for the teams. Yeah. That was gone. And all the stuff that we were playing around with recently is gone too. So that was a bit of a pain. It was lucky actually that we even were able to do the recap videos. Because it's relatively easy to do without having a lot of background footage except what would create that day. Yeah. So that was our week, but man, the U.S. has had a crazy week too.
Yeah, the U.S. always has a crazy week.
It sure feels like it. So good luck to our neighbors in the South who are having their election. Yeah. And good luck to our neighbors in the South who have recently had a new Supreme Court justice who was confirmed. Is that the word they use? Confirmed? It's a confirmation, right?
I think so.
So confirmed with less than 2 weeks ago to the election, somebody who is, for a judge who's supposed to be impartial, and judge on the law, it's ridiculous to me that it's the way the system works. It's so easy to put in somebody who couldn't be more clear about their, it's not loyalties, right? But what's the word I'm looking for?
Like agenda.
Yeah, with such a clear agenda.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Obviously everybody has to interpret the rule of the law through their sort of personal lens, right? Like the whole point is that you can read it in different ways. Right. And for stuff that doesn't have a precedent, you have to set the precedent, right? And for a lot of other stuff. And in those cases, you understand where some agenda bleeds in, but it seems like, and I'm sure this isn't just a one-way partisan thing. I think it's just how it works in America now. Right. Where anybody you put on seems to really clearly have an agenda that they're pushing. Yes. And that sucks. Because you'd think that somebody would come on and go, I want to, interpret the law as fairly as possible based off of what's written in the world that exists right now.
Right.
And then the next step
but this is the opposite. So
Yeah.
this new justice is saying not interpret in the way of the world it's meant right now, but in terms of what the founders meant how many 100 years ago.
Which is pulling it back. Yeah, because the whole point of... And the original Constitution was supposed to be reworked every certain amount of time. It was not supposed to be the final document. Right? But yeah, it is strange to me. And, I don't even know exactly how it works in Canada. I'm sure Canada's system is pretty comparable to the US, honestly, with just less of a... it's just less present in sort of the public psyche, if we actually looked into it.
But also maybe less polarized.
You'd hope.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be true, but I actually don't know. So
So there were two issues. I mean, I know that people have been having big arguments about it anyways, and it really divides along the Democrat-Republican line.
Yeah.
But what's striking to me as a non-Democrat and a non-Republican, two things about her. One is that so she was installed by Donald Trump in the last couple of years. So that's her entire experience as a judge. But she's never tried a criminal case. She's never had to sort of bring a case before Supreme Court. Her trial experience has been as a civil lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
But when people bring that up as an issue, out of all those different items, the only thing that they bring up as well, Justice Janet Kagan had never been a judge before she was appointed to the Supreme Court. And so it's a funny argument for me to hear, because they list all these different things in its totality, the lack of experience as being disqualifying.
Yeah.
But then they only pick on the one thing. So, well, there's this other judge that wasn't even a judge.
Yeah.
Who was like the dean of Harvard Law School or something, like did all these other things. And as a professor had actually brought 3 cases before the Supreme Court and won 2 of them.
Yeah.
So that's the funny thing to me, where it's that the best argument that you can make is one of, yeah, but what about this other person? And this other person is actually really kind of qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate for a lot of reasons. It's unfortunate because Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dying wish was not fulfilled, right? Of having the next president, whoever wins the next presidential election, to decide it. There was I'm forgetting the name right now, but it was a U.S. politician, I believe congressman, who was feel free to use this against me. We'll let the next president decide who, if a Supreme Court justice dies during Trump's term, we let the next president decide who puts it in. Which
Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was
that was the reason
for justification for
rejecting Merrick Garland.
Yeah.
Who was
in an election year, 100 something days before.
It was 10 months.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So, yeah. And, well, I mean, it goes to the whole idea that it's become less an issue of wanting to do the best for the country than it is for our team is winning. We want our team to keep on winning. We're going to take advantage of everything that we can get.
Yeah.
So, and the other issue I have actually with Judge Barnett is that there was a case that she adjudicated where she found that there was I want to say woman, but I think it was girl, somebody who was less than 18. I could be wrong. Who was in prison, who had been sexually assaulted by one of the guards.
Mm.
And she won a judgment against this guard for monetary damages. So it wasn't that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's that they established that he did it, and she was getting this money, and she ruled against it. She overturned that judgment. And her argument for that was that what he did wasn't in the course of his duties, so he couldn't be civilly liable for it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, all those kinds of things, to me, okay, so that's not a great judgment. Sure. But on top of that is that clearly there's a certain, a lack of impartiality.
Yeah.
And so how comfortable would you feel depending on what case you had, before a judge who you knew had ruled like this.
Yeah, it makes you not want to take stuff the same way. That is really challenging. Yeah, and for definitely replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, somebody who did so much for women and feminism, and also just equality in a lot of ways. One of the things that I saw about that with her afterwards is, before she was appointed as Supreme Court Justice, she brought stuff before the Supreme Court and before other courts, and one of the strategies that she used was putting cases before courts that were discrimination against men based off of gender, getting a precedent established,
right,
and then bringing equivalent cases with women.
The long game.
Yeah, where she used the fact that people would be more willing to hear out men to put cases forward and establish a legal precedent and then push it. And so she really was great for feminism, but she was great for equality in all senses, regardless of what gender you were. She would help you.
And I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think what she did was great. I think the argument that people make, though, that this was her dying wish, it matters. I think that's the wrong tack to take, because you can be a great person. It could be your dying wish. Doesn't mean necessarily that there's any obligation to meet it, right? It'd be nice. But I think the more important point is that like you said, precedents, right? Precedents are already established where you say, hey, this is too close to the election. Let the next president decide. So 10 months is too close.
Yeah.
But 2 months is not. 2 weeks is not. I don't know. It's just, he didn't even get a vote, right? Like, you know what? If you're going to at least give us the pretense of trying to be fair, let it go to vote and then vote him down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just it's scary. I mean, I know we're not in the States, but I feel like because they're our neighbors and we share a lot of culture, we share a huge border, that there's a long-standing relationship, right? Like a huge amount of trade. That whatever happens the next 2 weeks is going to have a big impact on what our lives are like in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and we're not going to get into injustice just yet. We're going to keep it on that political train, because our first comment is from Drake Pendragon, and they say...
Oh, and this was from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, this is from a while ago. We haven't had a chance to get
to these. Because we missed last week,
but we keep them banked up. They say, Black Lives Matter does deserve all the negative light they get painted with, because the people they have, and then in quotes, martyred, turn out to be committing crimes, doing something wrong, and then they ignore people who have died that were good people, like David Dorn. They openly put on their website that they want to, and then, quote, dismantle the nuclear family, unquote.
So David Dorn is interesting and tragic, right? So he was a retired police officer who was killed in some of the violence that happened after, I believe it was George Floyd's murder. So his widow is a Trump supporter. His children say he was a Democrat and stood against all the things that Trump has supported. And this goes back to the idea we talked about, I think, 1 week about Taylor Swift, right? How very rarely do you have a perfect victim.
Yeah.
And the same way you can't have a perfect victim, you can't have a perfect movement. I think, if anything, it speaks to how peaceful the protests have been for thousands of people protesting and the number of victims of violence on either side.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to say that was... There's no question in my mind that was a bad thing. But I think... the fact that it's not like it's been brushed under the carpet, right? These are things that are spoken about, and it's, what's the point I wanted to make about this? That, I mean, you look at all the different people that have been involved, right? Look at the police. You look at all the anti-fascists, all the people who identify as right-wing, all the people who are explicitly or subtly white supremacists. You've got Trump supporters. Obviously, there's some overlap in areas, right? How many deaths have there been, and who are the victims and who are the perpetrators? It feels like that. It goes back again. I think to the fact that just because there are white victims of police brutality doesn't negate the fact that Black people are subject to police brutality at a greater rate than others. So, I guess if the anti-fascist protesters are really that violent, there should have been a lot more cases like David Dorn, where we can point at them and say, hey, these people are awful. We need to really sort of clamp down on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I actually wanted to speak to was the part, I mean, this is, I think, one of the ideas about the disinformation that can happen. So Drake said they openly put on their website that they want to dismantle the nuclear family.
Yeah. First off, people can say a lot of things.
Yes.
I think separate from what happens, right? Black Lives Matter does not have the capacity as an organization to dismantle the nuclear family. Right? Like, anybody can say a lot. Like, I could say that I want to inflict some harm on the president of the United States. I have,
but you don't.
Yeah, I don't.
Right.
But I don't have the means to do that. If I, and it'd be fair, because that would be a specific threat. If I say that I am going to force everybody in Canada, I'm not gonna I don't just want gay marriage to be legal. I want it to be, mandatory. And I'm gonna marry everybody to same gender people,
right?
In all of Canada. I can make that threat because I have no, practical power of actually creating that.
So even aside from that, though, so this statement, it sort of piqued my interest. I thought that's kind of interesting. It seems sort of like a strange thing, to be doing when we were talking about before, like the Black Panthers, like other groups where they might be known for something. Yeah. But they have other things that they do. And in the case of Black Panthers, for example, they were actually doing lots of other good things.
Yeah.
So I dug around to find this. And one of the first hits I found was politifact.com. I think it's relatively neutral. I don't know that they actually have a conservative or progressive liberal bent.
I haven't heard anything. Right. I haven't heard anybody complain about PolitiFact being politically biased, which seems to be, people claim stuff is biased even when it isn't.
So the article that they had as a source for this kind of thing was that at the Republican National Convention, former NFL player Jack Brewer said Black Lives Matters openly on their website calls for the destruction of the nuclear family. And my fellow Americans, our families need each other. We need black fathers in the homes with their wives and children. And so then I did a bit of digging around. And even though there were links or potential hits that talked about the position that the group Black Lives Matter had taken, it was gone. So then I did a bit of digging because, what's on the internet stays forever. So on the Wayback Machine, I actually found what their statement was. And I can put this link in the description if anybody else wants to read it, but I wanted to actually read part of it. They had a big statement, and it was in the context of the statement. Maybe should I skip ahead to the sort of the money?
Sure,
quote?
If you want to.
It says, it was a long stuff. It talks about a lot. You know what? I feel like I'd be doing a bit of a disservice. I'll try to be really quick. I'll try to talk real fast. So their statement was, every day we recommit to healing ourselves and each other and to co-creating alongside comrades, allies, and family, a culture where each person feels seen, heard, and supported. We acknowledge, respect, and celebrate differences and commonalities. We work vigorously for freedom and justice for Black people and, by extension, all people. We intentionally build and nurture a beloved community that is bonded together through a beautiful struggle that is restorative, not depleting. We are unapologetically Black in our positioning. In affirming that Black Lives Matter, we need not qualify our position. To love and desire freedom and justice for ourselves is a prerequisite for wanting the same for others. We see ourselves as part of the global Black family, and we are aware of the different ways we are impacted or privileged as Black people who exist in different parts of the world. We are guided by the fact that all Black lives matter, regardless of actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs, immigration status, or location. We make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We build a space that affirms Black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. We practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their context. So that's where it starts. Now this is the money sort of quote. Mm-hmm. We make our spaces family-friendly and enable parents to fully participate with their children. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. Mm-hmm. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Mm-hmm. And let me just finish it. So I don't want to just cut it off there. And that was the main part, right? So we foster queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather the belief that all in the world are heterosexual, unless she/he or they disclose otherwise. We cultivate an intergenerational and communal network free from ageism. We believe that all people, regardless of age, show up with the capacity to lead and learn. We embody and practice justice, liberation, and peace in our engagements with one another.
Yeah.
And I think that quote kind of speaks for itself, right? I don't think they're even saying down with the nuclear family.
Yeah.
They're saying we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. And the fact that it's down, I mean, it totally wouldn't surprise me if they took it down because of all the people who were intentionally misinterpreting it.
Yeah, but when they say we they didn't even use dismantle in that paragraph, but we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. The word requirement there is, I think, what's actually important, where they're saying it's not a prerequisite.
Right. That somehow, that in order to be allowed the benefits and freedoms of, and enjoy the life of being an American, that somehow you have to do this.
And also the idea here is that what they're actually doing is supporting each other. They say how they're doing it, right? They don't say we're trying to dismantle this nuclear family structure and then like it's vague. They don't give you any sense of what they tell you exactly what they're doing here because they're supporting each other as extended families and villages. Right. So that's not doing anything negative to anybody outside of their sphere of influence,
right? That
in any way impacts the nuclear family structure. That is within their zone of influence. They are creating a positive environment, which makes it easier to be successful without participating in the nuclear family structure, which is totally different from.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I think the fact is that there is a huge benefit from growing up in a family with a mom, a dad, 1.3 children other than yourself.
Yeah,
and the stability that it takes to grow up to be a decent human being. Mm-hmm. And I, if anything, it's the exact opposite, right? We're saying
this is just the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child," but like implemented just in a mission statement, right? It has nothing to do with making anybody else live their lives in a different way. This is not meant to be disruptive to anybody else.
And that's why I thought this part, at least that part, was so important, because I see so much. If you don't go to, I see this in science. I see this in medicine, that if you don't go into the primary source, all the time what you're doing is you're offloading the need to think for yourself, and you're letting other people think for you. Mm-hmm. So I wish they hadn't felt the need to remove it, because I think this is actually quite a cool statement.
Yeah. So there we go. And we've got another comment here, also from Drake. This is something that I think is worth talking about. The majority of mental health professionals will not enter into a situation where there is physical risk to themselves. Think of it like trying to get a house call from a doctor. Shrinks don't go to your house. They have you come to their office. Also, they don't want to enter into an unknown situation, i.e. if someone in the home might have a weapon.
So this one I think I can be quick. I just want to point out that in Toronto, at least, we have some, but definitely not enough, crisis teams. So it's usually one police officer, one mental health nurse, and they're available for mental health crises when they've been identified as such. And I think, so you've got a situation, right? So it requires both safety and it requires mental health professionals. Then the question becomes, do you train mental health professionals to handle dangerous situations or potentially dangerous situations, or you train cops to handle mental health situations?
Yeah.
And so if you look at what we've been seeing, right, police officers clearly aren't that great at handling the part of their job that they should be responsible for, which is de-escalating the violence. Yeah. And does it make sense to ask them to do something that's even way more complicated than that?
Yeah, and the real problem is that, both mental health and like conflict de-escalation and like ensuring safety, those are two things that don't have a lot of overlap. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really make sense to have them overlap. Like, okay, if you think somebody is a danger to themselves or other people, for a mental health, if you think, not themselves or other people, just themselves. If you think somebody's a danger to themselves and you're making a mental health related call, the police come and they put you in a cop car and they forcibly bring you to the hospital, and then the police leave.
Yeah.
Right? So the only thing that the police are doing in this case is removing the person's access from, the possible weapon that you're talking about.
Right.
Right? But then after that, the police don't stay with the person forever. Right? Once they get to the hospital, there are people who are trained in, I've been in an emergency psych ward, and they have to restrain some people. Yeah. Because they are a danger to themselves, and while they are restraining people against their will, those people can often be aggressive.
Yes.
So a lot of those mental health professionals who are working in a hospital environment, in emergency psych wards, are actually physically restraining people. The only thing that's different versus someone's home, and I'm not going to say this is a small difference because it's not, is it's the environment, right? Where the environment is designed where people can't harm themselves as easily and don't have the tools to harm other people, period, hopefully.
And it's sort of a double-edged sword too, because if they can't harm themselves, but they're also in an environment where they're less likely to be triggered by they're comfortable there. It's a lot of it. It's like people who have dementia.
Yeah.
They're going to have more trouble if you take them out of their home, out of a familiar environment and into a place where, sure, it might be safer. They're going to decompensate even faster.
Yeah. And it's also just generally, emergency psych wards are, not good places to be.
No.
So the problem is when you bring in police on those calls, and the only thing they can do is bring you into an emergency psych ward.
Yeah.
It's kind of terrible. It's something that people who actually might be a danger to themselves, who might otherwise be willing to call for support from the government, might not be willing to, because they know that what's going to happen is they're going to get put in handcuffs and brought to a hospital. And so,
what's funny? It just occurs to me now, and it's not a great analogy, but it's sort of related, is you've got a team basically, right? They have separate roles. They do their own thing. And although it connects more easily with, say, role-playing games where you actually have different jobs, right? You have maybe a fighter, you have a healer, you have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Justice, we have basic damage dealer, we have a tank, we have a special specialist. God. And sometimes you might unbalance a team for specific goals. But if it's not working, if you send a team with all tanks, you're going to, not be successful.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why it's not that great analogy, because you can send in an all offensive team, because all you care about is destroying the other team and not actually having anything to show for it after.
But clearly the police is not an all offensive team. In this
right. They're not meant
metaphor.
To be. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think at the very least, it makes sense. And when we say defund the police, we've said this before, we'll say it again. Right? We're maybe going to talk about this.
Oh, this next part. This is really good.
This is the next part. But then when you say, we're not, it'd be hard to get a mental health professional out instead of a police officer. You mentioned the crisis teams, right? Where you have a mix.
Not instead, right?
Yeah, it's not
do
instead.
Both. Tastes great, less filling. It's like Miller Lite. Tastes great, less filling.
Yeah, because you'll send
why not both?
Multiple cops out to a call. So send a cop and a mental health professional instead.
So this is where I age myself a little bit, because I think the old thing about both is the Miller Lite. It used to be taste great and less filling, but the new one, I think, is that girl who is doing the tortillas, where it's crunchy, but it still stands. Why not both? Right? So they had that new tortilla that had the flat bottom, so you could stand it up and fill it while it's there.
Oh, like Old El Paso or something?
I can't remember, but it's like that. I've seen. Yeah, okay. Because I think Miller Lite has abandoned that sort of what's the saying, whatever their
slogan
a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Geezer. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So getting into the next part, because talking about potentially defunding the police or other models for what we're talking about here. So Drake Pendragon has another comment. The crime rate goes down when the police budget goes up because police are attracting more qualified individuals and giving them better training. I was an MP, military police, for 20 years before retiring, and when I looked at applying for a state police job, I was told that I was overqualified because I had experience as well as a degree. But due to the current defund the police movement, I turned down the job because I don't want to work with people who are going to be getting inferior training due to lack of funding.
Yeah. I had a bunch of other things to say about it, but in the interest of time, because this was from, like I said, more than a week ago.
Yeah.
So if we're really talking about money, if you look at the settlements that police departments are paying out for doing their jobs badly, New York Police Department, largest police force in the country, 36,000 members, city is 8.3 million people. During the fiscal year 2019, the city paid out $175.9 million in civil judgments and claims for police-related lawsuits. And that doesn't include all settlements, because some of them are made with the city comptroller's office, so it happens at a level that's not directly negotiated with the police.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, if you could, so the example they gave was that comptroller's office gave out $4 million to pre-litigation claims for excessive force.
Yeah. And talking again a little bit about defund the police, the money's not going to go nowhere, right?
Right.
We're not talking about the money going nowhere. And we also aren't talking about there not being somebody who's doing some of the jobs that the police are doing, right? What defund the police is being able to sort of go back to the drawing board and look at what people want the police to be doing, what we are paying for the police doing the stuff that we want them to be doing. Like, so, detective work, right? Investigating murders, homicides. I don't think anybody argues that investigating murders and investigation of crimes is something worthwhile doing.
Right.
But, looking at the numbers, the police force is not great at investigating homicides. I forget what percentage of it, but it's about half that just go unsolved. Right. And which isn't to say that, like, there's a way to instantly make them so much better at it. Right. But that's just something that they straight up, they're not as good as you would want them to be. And also a very small fraction of the budget actually goes into that. Right. Same with, like, sexual violence and sexual assault. Investigation of those claims, it was something like in the US, like 95% of them don't end in charges, like reports, which is kind of terrible, especially because we know that there's a lot of people who never report, right? And so you look at the stuff that you want the police to be doing, you allocate the budget so that the money is going where there is results and where the results are things that the citizens actually want as results, right? And then you figure out what stuff is not a police's job, and you give the money that we were giving to the police to people who already have that training, right? And you resegment that funding out. And then depending on what model you're working on, maybe you do community programs in the communities that have been negatively affected by policing, which is something that I personally think we should do, right? So like disadvantaged and like racialized communities should be getting some of that funding to prevent crime from happening in the first place, right? To enfranchise people. But, and when you leave that at the end of the day, every police officer that you hire should be getting as much or more training as anybody who has in the past, or whatever they're called under the new system, right? However you conceptualize it. We're not saying that anybody should get less training or anybody should get less money, right? And the main problem is that right now, because the current system is being held on to, when we are defunding the police, the money really is just going away. Right? And it's because if you go back to the drawing board, if you reallocate the money in a sort of smart, considerate way, then you get a situation in which every person who is being hired is still getting the exact same or better training. But you can't sort of try to hold on to these last vestiges of the system while you're losing money. Because then if you have the same sort of hiring needs, if you are trying to do all the same stuff with less money, then you are going to do a crappier job.
And I think from a historical context, too, there's the important thing to, let's say we ignore whatever controversy there might be about where policing started.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's some argument to be made that the root of policing is actually in white supremacy.
Yeah.
But so let's ignore that, and let's say that the intent,
and protecting capital.
Yes, protecting property. So let's ignore that and just say that the argument is that policing is meant to protect all people.
Yeah.
Then the problem becomes that the police have had good unions, so it's very difficult to take away money. But it's very easy to make the argument and spend more money in times where there's a perception that more policing is needed. So this is something that almost never contracts, almost always stays the same or grows.
Yeah.
And what you end up with is, at times, when the crime rate goes down, you've got a lot of people sitting around who don't need to do stuff. So there's a motivation to make sure that they are busy, and then you give them jobs that maybe other people would be able to do better, but other people aren't around because you don't have the money for them, but you have the money for the police who are already hired.
Yeah. And we're not saying it's like not an incredibly challenging system, and that there's not a huge amount of work to be done. I think it is very clear that work does need to be done, and that it can't keep going as it is. And I think there's a lot of ways that don't make things much better, right? People trying to hold on to the same system and just getting less money, does not make things better, right? Because then if you're in a less prestigious position with less access to resources, trying to do the exact same things as before, then you're only going to attract even worse people, right? So just taking away money and trying to do all the same thing, then you are totally just going to attract the people who don't care that they are perceived as racist, and who don't get even as much training, and you are going to be stretched thinner, and it's going to be more about quotas, and you run into sort of all the issues that we've had and more. You can't just cut the budget by X% and not have any sort of oversight of where that money goes.
I think if we take a step back too and look at it from a bigger picture and not just at the money part, I think the best argument I've heard about how you can improve policing is require that the people who are police in a community live in that community.
Yeah.
And then we can get away from the more complicated works. It's like we talked about before, where sometimes where there's lots of things that you can do, and some of them are way more complicated and take for a long time to fix, and some that I think could make a big difference now. I think that's probably the biggest thing, more important than defunding, is to give the people who are policing a stake and a connection to the community that they work in.
Trying to keep it safe, because then you keep your own backyard safe, right?
Right.
And maybe you don't care so much about people who you are not invested in at all, who at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens to this community, because you get to go home.
Right.
Yeah.
And home is a distance away where you actually don't have to worry about the consequences.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff we can do. The good news is that we are not the people tasked with actually figuring out what to do, because we're not in that position. So we definitely have lots of advice, but
like everybody got lots of things to say.
Everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we are not going to be implementing any of these things directly.
Yeah.
Which is good. Everybody also thinks that their solution is the best thing. I am under no illusion that the only issue is that the wrong people are in power, and that if everything was exactly the same, but I was sitting in a high enough position to affect change, that I'd be able to just fix everything. Yeah. Because life is way too complicated for that. But it is.
But I think we can get a feel for the general direction, and it has to do with the intent.
Yeah.
And what it's like a lot of things, right? It's like social safety nets. We can disagree about how things should be implemented, but if you fundamentally think that they shouldn't exist, then we're going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm. So there we go.
Yeah.
We've got our first question about injustice now. It's only been 38 minutes, so we're pretty fast this time.
Yeah.
This one comes from Jermaine Mercer, and they say, I have a question. What am I supposed to do if I come across a cheater? And then in brackets, hacker. Question mark. Immediately leave the current fight and report it. I'm really getting upset at this.
And I answered this originally back then, and I wanted to expand on it. So I gave Jermaine a link to where to report. And it's a complicated question, right? And the problem is where injustice is in its life cycle right now.
Yeah.
So policing. Oh, that's interesting. Policing. So policing other players' behavior, it shouldn't be your job, but it does make the programmers, and I guess they're not like really developers, the moderators, responsibility, but it does help. It's like other forums where you're on where you can report it to bring it attention, because the moderators can't read everything, right? But it then becomes an issue of, so what do you want to do for yourself personally, right? Because if you don't want them to get any extra battle points off your fight if you happen to lose, you can quit at any point before the fight is registered as a loss. So even you can fight right up into the last moment where you think you're going to lose.
Yeah, and then just leave.
Where your last person's knocked out and they're flying back before they land, you can leave that and they don't get the points. But if you want to do something more, you can report them to Warner Brothers. And the problem now is that you can report them, but given how responsive the developers have been to issues with the game and how it works, I think the chance of something actually happening based on your report is pretty low.
Yeah, the support team doesn't really engage very much anymore, it looks like.
And it's a shame because I think if they did, I'd probably make a run for the top 10 one season just to get the badge of the like number 1 to 3. I think it's possible. I think it's definitely with the team that you're seeing right now, definitely possible because what we're looking at is averaging out, even with all the loading screens, 7 minutes for an ultimate run that's max battle points.
Yeah.
And it's like Survivor, right? It was just to do it once. Although now with Survivor, I mean, we did it originally when it was only 16 fights before they expanded to, I think, 21. And the amount of time that it would take to fight, I just don't feel like it's worth it. I guess we should be lucky or feel lucky that we still got the game that exists as it does now, where they're still paying for the servers so we can have our online battles and get the rewards and stuff and all that good stuff. But it's in comparison to what it used to be, I feel a little bit sad about injustice. It's an injustice.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So there we go. Our next, these are just fun questions.
Yeah.
Or this isn't even really a question. This is just some comments. So first off, Stephanie Hughes says, I think y'all should do an age reveal, and then replied to their own comment to say, lol, since they do podcasts, this is CB is a podcat. And then, okay, I'll leave now.
Hey, that's great.
And so
I actually laughed out loud when I saw that.
Yeah, CB being a podcat was very funny. I found that delightful. I don't think I laughed out loud. But,
I did. We didn't update on CB this week.
That's super fun. Yeah.
So what's interesting about so he had his doctor's appointment this week.
Yeah.
A vet. Well, vet's a doctor, right? Don't they call vets doctors?
I don't know.
And they have, if anything, I think a vet, and no disrespect to medical doctors, but they definitely have a different skill set because they have to diagnose stuff without being able to take a first person history.
Yeah.
They have to be able to do work with multiple systems in a way that humans don't, and they have to work with multiple animal species that humans don't. That's
true. You don't have like an ear, nose, and throat vet,
right? And maybe you do, but it would be like, you know what I mean? Like it's not vets. Are there vets that only look at certain breeds of cats?
I don't know.
They break it down into some vets specialize in large animals and small animals, and but they all do like stuff.
A city vet probably wouldn't be able to like deliver like a cow, like a calf.
I bet they would.
Maybe. I don't know.
I bet they would. I mean, I'm sure their training requires.
They wouldn't have the experience as much.
That's true.
Probably.
But I remember one of our neighbors was in veterinary school, and one of the issues I remember hearing about was that a lot of the people going into veterinary medicine want to work with small animals like pets, and that there was a dearth of people who wanted to work with large animals.
Yeah.
And we still need those, right? Like cows.
Arguably, we need that more than we need the small animals.
You think so?
Well, because when we're talking about like animals that are part of our agriculture system, we don't, strictly speaking, need pets. We love them, and they're great to have. Yeah. But if you didn't have any like vets for pets, right, life would continue. If you have nobody if something goes wrong with a cow and there's nobody on the planet who's able to figure out what happens, I think that's a lot more damaging to our sort of like economy and like food,
right?
That's and everything. Like if we don't have access to like meat the same way, right? Like if I don't know if vets deal with like mad cow disease, but like if there was no way to like figure out like where it was coming from and like isolate it and like nobody knew what like the procedure was to like with sick animals.
I don't think you can do anything because it's a prion disease, right?
I don't know.
So I think once you've got mad cow, it's really just you gotta put them down and you gotta keep them out of the food chain.
Yeah, maybe. Anyways, I think if you had to pick one to have none of, I think it would be worse to have no large animal like agriculture vets.
Yeah, that's true. So we got sort of as much as in the weeds we got even further in the weeds because that wasn't even about CB. Yeah. So CB's funny. He's gained since we first met him. When we first met him, we took him to the shelter. He was 2.9 kilos.
Yeah.
He is now 4.2 kilos and not significantly taller. I guess I can't really say that because he is taller. Because when he tries to, just the other day, he was actually, you know how he tries to go up when the doors open, he tries to climb up the door frame, and he can't get any purchase, and he jumps up as high as he can. He's going a little bit higher, and he's scrabbling on, but he was able to catch the door jamb, and he was able to stay there. I caught him in the kitchen door jamb. He was holding on for about 3 seconds. Before he dropped. Instead of just going right up and right down, he dropped. And where he stretches out to try to reach the counter now, he actually can reach the top of the counter without and get his sort of face up to it.
Yeah.
Even though before he could just grab his arms, now he can actually get his face up to it.
He's definitely bigger.
Yeah, he's definitely heavier. So if you're talking like, all right, so 1.3 kilos, that is 2.5. That's almost 3 pounds. He's wow.
And it's also a significant percentage of his body weight.
Yeah, so he's almost, wow. Okay, so he's definitely chunky. So the vet was laughing, saying, yeah, he's not getting underfed. He's a lot of fun. Again, remember he was, all right, so the trend was he's first started off being really affectionate and wanting to hang around us all the time. Mm-hmm. Then he wanted to be near but not on us. And now he's right back to being all over us. Yeah. And, it's kind of neat. But
pretty fun.
The problem, I guess, is that if it's so tempting when, he's asleep to not want to disturb him. But he can sleep for hours.
Oh, he'll sleep for the whole day. Cats do nothing but sleep.
Yeah, and I don't know how he does it. I guess he shifts around. When he decides to shift, it's okay. When I do, I have to work around his schedule because then I start feeling numb in places that I know I shouldn't. And then I start getting uncomfortable.
You lose blood supply.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to have to change my sort of approach soon and hope that he still wants to hang around if every once in a while I have to shove him off me because I got stuff to do and it's been a couple hours falling asleep on the couch trying to keep him comfortable. Okay.
Yeah. So there we go. That's our cat update, but we do like the idea of the pod cat. I feel like that. If we give CB updates in the future, we'll have to like call it our like pod cat, like within our podcast or something. We're doing something with that. It's a cute turn of phrase.
Yeah.
So our next question, or I guess our next block of text, comes from user Care. And they say, hey, I've been a viewer for many years now. Didn't comment much, though, and I've changed accounts and names throughout the years. Anyways, it's kind of a loaded question, so here I go. And feel free to stop me at any time if you want to answer a specific part. So, Care says, I started a new account about 2 months ago. Suicide Squad Deadshot was my first challenge, which I abused heavily to get a gold team on my first day playing. Which, first off, is very impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular, actually.
Yeah. My overall goal for the game is to have a sandbox experience, and the one issue with this is power creep.
Oh, sorry. Actually, you know what? I think... Sorry. It's impressive, but they also picked the right moment, because Suicide Squad Deadshot would have been the one that didn't have requirements.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect illustration, right? Where when you have a challenge that doesn't have a lot of requirements, it really helps you engage the newer player.
Yeah.
One day is pretty good. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I'll have a hard time using a character like Elseworld Flash or John Stewart Green Lantern alongside the new characters. My way of getting around this was to keep my characters at around 75,000 HP at level 50. Flashpoint Bats is Elite 5, Animated Bats is Elite 7, but both have around 63,000 HP, which will go up as I buy more Alliance support cards. However, I have a couple issues with basing it just off health. For one, characters lose part of their individuality and quirks regarding stats. Another problem is, normally a card like the upcoming Apocalypse Darkseid would have very high HP and decent damage, but if I scale his high HP to be the same as every other card, he becomes an average HP, low damage character. Now, to finally ask a question, do you have any tips or recommendations on how I should spend my elites and augments to have a reasonably balanced playing experience without removing a card's individuality in their stats? Should I just get everyone Elite 7 and work from there?
I think they're doing it right. The first part, when they were asking it and mentioning what they're doing, the most important part is get everybody to level 50.
Yeah.
That's actually the most important part.
So I think, the main thing here is that I think you've identified the thing with health, right? Where it makes them much less unique. And what's important is when you... Augments basically let you reshape a character, and most characters are close enough to balanced that if you fully augment either their attack or their health, it will make that one the higher stat, right? It'll make whichever stat you want the higher stat, generally speaking, or bring it up to be almost the same, right? If you add that full 300 points you get with those augments.
And when you say same as a base stat, but not where it ends up.
Yeah.
Because as for gold characters, for sure...
Their health scales up faster. Than health.
Yeah.
As they level. Yeah, so I think the main thing here is that you sort of have to... You can add up both stats, right? And go for the average of both instead of just health, which will, as far as matchmaking is concerned, be probably more balanced, right? And actually get you characters that are the same sort of tier in the eyes of the actual online multiplayer system.
Right.
But that also is more work. I think, the main important thing is to get them up to level 50 as fast as possible.
Because then it won't change. Because the problem with, if you don't have them level 50 and you're playing around with them and you find the team that you like, once they level up, it starts unbalancing your team again.
Yeah. And once they're level 50, once you're all the easier characters to get, all the sort of lower stat characters are all max elite already, what you need to do is play with them in the teams that you want to play with them in, and then just elite up the rarer characters until they feel about as powerful as the sort of lower tier characters that you have in terms of stats. And
sort of along that line, but not exactly then, is that you can adjust not just for how it feels, but or how they play, but just how successful you are in winning.
Yeah.
So if you've got if you've got somebody who you want to play as your basic damage dealer, but then you find that the fight's not that good, and when they come in and do basic damage, they're actually not that useful, bump them up a little bit. Right? Yeah. And I think your advice about starting off with the weakest ones is great, because Care mentioned, is it Care or is it Care?
Care.
I know, I'm just wondering.
Oh, like Care or something?
Yeah.
Like if it's pronounced differently? We'll go with Care for now.
All right. Is that you work with the lowest, because when the next part that you didn't read, because I interrupted you for the question, was maybe worth mentioning that because I'm missing all of the Alliance support cards except for the 2, 3%, and 4% HP and damage cards, I'm missing out on max BP. I get 4k for the first 2 battles, 4.5 for the middle battles, and 5k at the end, which isn't a lot of loss, but like I said, might be worth mentioning. Thanks. So that's actually important, because if anything, that's probably the perfect threshold, because you know that you move up a little bit more, and it doesn't always have to be just the health. It's a combination of health, and I'm not exactly sure how.
Yeah.
But you can still maintain that sort of individuality by having bumping them up a little bit higher, so they have higher stats, but then their attack is like for Apocalypse Darkside. His attack is a little bit lower, but his health is still a little bit higher, as long as you keep the team's balance. But then at that threshold, where if you wanted to improve them a little bit more and get 5,000 for each fight, you're close enough that you can make minor adjustments, but you also are not facing Astro Harness that much.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Astro Harness, to me, it doesn't feel like Astro Harness makes the fights harder as much as they just make the fights longer. Because we've got a team that can deal with Astro Harness. We've got our own Astro Harness to do that.
Yeah.
But it's only challenging insofar as it gives you, the longer the fight is, the more opportunity you have to make a mistake and lose.
Yeah. And another thing we'll say, if you're playing from the start, again, right, depending on, this will matter more or less depending on whether or not you still have your other account. One thing that I will say is that how a character plays, practically, is much less to do with their health and their damage, and the ratio of their health to their damage, as it is to their speed, how their specials work, and all that other stuff. Yeah. So, in my opinion, we don't really do health or damage augments at all, right? But if what you have the opportunity to, in doing health or damage augments, is to match the characters to your playstyle. So if you're winning consistently, then your main challenge becomes how fast you can win. So if you're able to win consistently, I would say boost attack and not health.
Right.
Because proportionally, you'll just be fighting people with higher stats. When you add more to your attack, they're not matching you against people who have approximately the same amount of attack.
Right.
So, you won't be creating an unbalanced playing experience unless you start losing by augmenting attack. And generally speaking, you shouldn't be losing many more fights. There's not many situations in which unless you're running into more people with like Astro Harness, for example, you don't have the ability to deal with them. Right. The only thing you'll be doing is giving yourself harder fights when you augment their attack. So in terms of which stat to augment, how to shuffle those around, that does not matter, I think, nearly as much as just the way that the characters actually fundamentally play.
Well,
because health lets you screw up more, and attack lets you win faster, which also means that you have less chances to screw up. And it really is a question of how you like to play,
right?
Which is what makes more sense for upgrading one or the other from there, and it's not so much at like unbalancing any of the characters by augmenting one or the other.
Yeah, if anything, crit chance, crit damage, those are the two most important things to augment.
Yeah.
But you don't have any control over which augmentations you get.
And then attack and health is more like salt to taste, right? Where it doesn't...
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So, but I think at the end of the day, did we cover everything? Is that a full sort of discussion of it? Is there anything else that we want to say?
I mean, we could... This is something you could talk about for forever, right? Like, it's just too long. I mean, we're talking broadly about stuff. I think the approach is a good one, where if you start with the weaker characters that have the lowest stats...
The weaker characters that you still want to use on multiplayer teams.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing, too, right? At some point, you're going to want to max out some characters, if only just to finish the story mode, offline mode.
Or for grinding for credits in offline mode, or for, challenges, for speed and challenges.
And the thing is, grinding, you really only need 50 Elite 7.
Yeah.
You never need to go higher than that, because you used to be able to grind with 40 Elite 5, which was the maximum that was available when the game first started.
Mm-hmm.
But broadly speaking, I mean, we can't really go into particulars, because that's sometimes the hardest question, not knowing what people have and where they have them, right? But Elsewhere Flash is a great character. We used to play with him all the time because I love Flash characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but we will maybe... do you just want to read this question out and then not really say much about it?
It's not even a question. All right.
Yeah. So, first comment comes from user. I won't even name them because it doesn't matter. They say, guys, we don't like to watch you guys talking. We like to watch Power Glitch. And then we've got a couple comments from different people. So Yehuda Bassalian says, I disagree completely. Dark Knight says you're on your own on this one. And then we have another comment separately from Yehuda. As always, let us know how to pronounce your name if you would like us to do a better job. Mm-hmm. And by us, I mean me. And I'll do my best. And they say, don't listen to the guy who said not to talk about the game. He clearly doesn't know your channel.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I don't know. I'm going to take a stab. Is Yehuda Armenian? Or at least the name is Armenian, because I learned at some point, or just noticed at some point, that names that end in IAN are very often Armenian.
So there we go. But I just gotta say, we love interactions like this, because it's just, we don't need you guys sticking up for us, but it's always kind of fun when people do. And it's a good reminder that we have some wonderful fans, and the people who support us are really just very, very supportive, very kind individuals, and we appreciate you.
Yep.
I don't know if we need to say, do you have anything you wanted to say about these comments?
No, I did originally, but I think we'll just that was good. That's a good way to end it.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we've got some other people that we appreciate that we're going to talk about here. So first off, a shout out to Eliza Vending Machine Pizza Caton. She bought a pizza from a vending machine for some reason, and it looked really bleak. Like, it looked terrible. She sent me a picture. It looked barely edible. If you've seen Nun Pizza with left beef, it looked approximately as intended to be eaten as Nun Pizza with left beef did. But apparently it tasted okay. And this shout out has been brought to you by a vending machine which dispenses pizza, because apparently that's a service we need. We'd also like to thank all the people who support us on Patreon.
Wait, was it a slice, or was it like a personal pizza?
Like a pizza, like a personal pizza. It was
like so small, in its entirety.
The picture was like half a pizza in a pizza box. I don't know. I don't know if the vending machine like heated it up. Like, I have no clue. The mechanics of it really escape me, and the need for that as a thing seems dubious. And the look of the product really makes me think that it was a mistake. But
to install it or to buy it?
Both. All of the above. And there was no step of the line in the process of the idea in someone's head to that pizza in her hands that was a worthwhile step in taking. But anyways, we also would like to thank all of the lovely people who support us on Patreon.
And that would be Consul Peasant and Edwoon at the top tier last word, Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier, Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., and Irvin Ruiz, who support us on the credited level, and Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, and Gavin Malott at the gratitude level.
Yeah, thanks so much for our support. Thanks so much to everybody for watching this, commenting, however you engage with us. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time. Komoda.